Class 95 on the Golden Doves. Again, it's a freezing morning. I think it's colder today even than it was yesterday. It's certainly cloudier, that's for sure. So we're studying a new section, which is really amazing. We're page 49. And this is section 8 of Semiology and Metaphysics. It's called Expressive Actions. Expressive actions. So there are certain actions that we take that express a certain idea. Encoding and decoding. So in these expressive actions, we encode certain information, and then later on, we need to understand what was the information that we encoded. We need to decode, right? So maybe Avotenu, they encoded certain information in the Misvot, and now we need to decode what was encoded originally. So let's start today. I only have a few minutes, but still worth it. So daily dose of Golden Doves. A culture, any culture, is distinguished not only by its language and civilization, but particularly by the system it employs to encode its values and collective experiences. So, of course, every society has a language, and the language structures the mental apparatus of those people who speak that language. So that's one aspect to a society. There's a civilization, there are certain institutions. So in America, you have Hollywood, you have CNN, you have Fox News, you have different institutions, right? But there's also a system that society uses to encode the values of that society and to encode the historical experiences of that society. It doesn't have to be historical experiences. It could be whether historical or it's cold and I can't change the page, or mythological, right? There are mythological experiences as well, and transmit them to future generations. So there's certain mythologies that different countries like to transmit, right? I know there's like certain, I think was it Iceland, Sweden maybe, or one of the Nordic countries, where they have a certain ceremony in the Winter Olympics, which I don't like the Olympics, so I'm just going to put it out there, I'm sorry. But anyway, there was a certain ceremony that represented certain Nordic gods, and I don't know, whatever, Abodazara, stupidity, but they had like the ceremony. So that's a ceremony which encoded a mythology, right? Not a historical event. In this fashion, every culture has its own particular historiography. Historiography is different than history. History is what happened. Historiography is how was what happened recorded by the people to whom it happened, right? That's historiography. Right? So there's a certain historiography and system to decode the past and encode messages for posterity. So we also want to encode certain messages for the future generations about what happened to us. How do we encode those messages, right? Very interesting. Ritual, too, can best be understood in terms of the encoding and decoding function. So you have many rituals among the pagan idolaters, Aztecs, for example. They have certain rituals, and in these rituals, it would be encoding certain information for future generations. The eagle god once passed by and did this and this and this, and because of that, we now do this. Ultimately, it serves to encode and communicate the hereditary mnemonic trace of a people. So these rituals are there to encode the memories, the traces of memories of a people. I want to give you the best example. L'avdil ben Kodesh, Lechol, ben HaTahor, ben HaTameh, ben Israel, Lagoyim. We count the Omer. It's a Mitzvah Deoraita, of course, or Mitzvah de Rabbanan. Some I follow on about Mitzvah Deoraita. Nevertheless, it's a Mitzvah. And everybody agrees it's Mitzvah Deoraita. The question is whether Bizman Hazeh it's Deoraita or de Rabbanan. But nevertheless, again, getting back to the point, the Sefirat HaOmer is a way for us to encode a certain historical experience that we had, right? And now here so it was encoded by our fathers who received the Torah, and the Torah says Kal HaOmer. So that encodes the experience of the Jewish people leaving Egypt not just in the abstract, we left Egypt, we escaped, but we automatically and intimately connected it with Ma'amad al-Sinai. That was the way we experienced that historical episode. So we never just left Egypt in the abstract to a vacuum. We left Egypt, la'avod et ha'elohim al ha'ar hazeh, as Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So today, when we count the Omer, we have to decode what was encoded there. And for us, we have to understand that Pesach is not its own holiday. And in the Jewish mind, freedom in the abstract is meaningless. There is no freedom from, but freedom to, right? Freedom from means, well, again, I'm just free. I'm free from work. I'm free from, the obligations and responsibilities. We're not interested in that. We're freedom to worship Hashem, freedom to do the Torah. That's called Herut, right? So you see how we encoded the message in Sefirat HaOmer, and then now we decode. I'll just give you an example, right? As stated earlier, linguistic proficiency alone at the lexical and grammatical levels does not allow the alien to penetrate a culture. It's very important. Let's say a person now learns Hebrew, a goy. He learns Hebrew, he learns biblical Hebrew, he knows the dikduk, and he says, and now I can read the Torah of the Jewish people. He's a goy, right? Goy she'asak b'Torah hayam nita. Now he's a goy. We say no, he shouldn't be studying the Torah. Why? He knows the language, he knows biblical Hebrew, he took courses in it, he knows biblical grammar, he knows the syntax of the Hebrew, so why shouldn't he be studying Torah? Because that's not enough. Linguistic proficiency is not enough to penetrate a culture. It is not difficult to imagine a foreign genius, highly proficient in our language, incapable of making heads or tails of a comic book that a child would find thoroughly intelligible and enjoyable, right? So let's say a person from a foreign culture came to America and saw a comic book, right, about a particular superhero. He knows English perfectly, and now read and understand the comic book. Or better example, New York Post. Headline in the New York Post, right? They was very ingenious. He wouldn't understand it because it's not enough to know the language. You need to penetrate the culture, right, in order to understand the newspaper or to understand the comic book, right? Such an alien is either stealing the culture in the sense of trying to appropriate for himself something which does not belong to him. It's a violation, right? Torah sibalanu Moshe morasha kilat Yaakov. The Hachamim say the Torah is the inheritance of Israel. The pasuk says that, and they say al tikle morasha ela meorasa. The Torah is like the bride of Israel, and therefore, if a goy is osek b'Torah bar minan, it's like he violated the Torah. For this reason, who the heck? So all these goy professors and these even Jewish professors, secular Jewish professors, studying Chumash and teaching Bible. I mean, it's ludicrous. How can anybody take that seriously? They have biblical criticism, where they tell us that what part of this pasuk comes from him and that pasuk comes from that. I mean, it's just utter nonsense, right? You understand it's utter nonsense. How could anybody take it seriously? But have, precise because it's nonsense. That's where they fund it and they teach it. Biblical criticism is alive and well, and till they go to hell in Olam Haba, and then they won't be alive and well. But I'm saying in Olam Hazeh, it's alive and well. So such an alien is either stealing the culture. You see, it's stealing the culture in the sense of trying to appropriate for himself something which does not belong to him, or else he is violating it in the sense of imposing his will on it and wrenching it out of its original shape. So all these, modern study of Bible, outside the context of Judaism. I'm not talking about professors of Bible who study the Torah in accordance with the Masoret of Am Yisrael and our cultural code. I'm not talking about that, of course. Today in Eretz Yisrael, we have fantastic biblical studies where they've discovered the archaeology and they connected with the Pesukim and the Torah. It's unbelievable. I'm talking about the secular study of Bible. I mean, it's an oxymoron. How can you have the secular study of Bible? It's like saying, I want to have the flat earth theory study of relativity, right? Or I want to have the anti-gravity theory study of physics. I mean, it's preposterous, right? Nobody would take that seriously. But in the case of Jewish studies, we take it, of course, the secular study of Bible. A secular professor who is kofer ba'ikar, he's going to study the Bible. He's going to tell us things that we don't know, right? That's precious. It's amazing how there's so much lunacy in the world we live in today. I mean, you don't have to go to politics in the White House to see lunacy. You can just see it in academic institutions as well, right? The only way to penetrate a culture is by mastering its peculiar process of encoding and decoding. So if you're not familiar with the way Am Yisrael encodes information, decodes information, you can't read the Bible. You can't read the New York Post, Lehavdil again, then Kodesh Lehol, of course, right? But I'm just bringing it so you see it more clearly. Then and then alone would it be possible to participate in the act of speech of a culture. Only if you are part of and privy to the hermeneutic cultural code of a people can you enter into a dialogue with those people, right? Rather than passively perceiving it from the perspective of the third person. If you're not part of that cultural or hermeneutical code, you are then the third person. You can stand on the side, you can try to listen, maybe you'll understand some things, maybe you won't understand some things, listen to the speech going on, but you can't participate in that speech, right? So if I heard people talking about cricket in India, I think it's a fun sport in India, I don't have a clue what is happening in that game. I'm not interested in cricket. I don't care about it. And if I hear two people talking about cricket, it will be very embarrassing. Or I had to like join the conversation as if, although I know about cricket and I understand the game and like, right? That's a goy talking in the university about biblical studies, right? Or a secular Jew talking about biblical studies. So you can be a third person. Know your place. Am Yisrael, we're first and second person. We have that dialogue with God.